Welcome to our zombie apocalypse webinar. Greetings from Homecoming X in Johannesburg, and delighted to have you all here. I am Angel Jones. I'm the CEO of Homecoming X. We're an executive search firm that places permanent, part-time and hourly talent across Africa. And we have these webinars once a month, and I don't think we have had so much interest in a webinar ever. We've had hundreds of people saying, oh, I can't even be there, please record it, or can you give me the session later? And a massive thanks to Sarah for bringing this topic to us. I think it really does speak volumes around what the sentiment currently is out there. I think from our point of view, we work with you guys, one day you'll be out, now you're our client, one day you'll be our candidate or our colleague or our connection, whatever that is. But we, I think, have sensed this real exhaustion, I think, with a lot of the people we're working with, and that there just seem to be so many moving things that, that person inside, we seem to miss a bit. So certainly from that point of view, it's fantastic to be discussing this. And also, obviously, from an EVP point of view, for any candidates we try and get for you, it's important that there's a healthy, happy organization which starts with you. And I think that really important thing is that it starts with you guys. And you know how they tell you on the plane, put your oxygen mask on first? That's really what this session is all about. So what I want is invite everybody is just take a deep breath. The session is for you. We are here to hear, so we're delighted that Sarah can share all her stuff with us, but please use this chat. Please share what you've learned, share what you're hating, you're loving, all the rest. It's really important that, this is very much a community session. It would be great also to find out where you're from. And as Sarah's talking, please feel free to ask questions or comments. We will have an open floor at the end. And we also will be asking you at the very end, if you wouldn't mind just filling in a quick 1-minute poll. So that's really the things. The important thing is just to breathe and know that this is a really important session so that you guys yourselves, as we say, can fall in love with your career again. So very great to introduce Sarah, CPO of Skynamo. She has worked with many brands, including BrightRock, Wyzetalk, Clickatell, Neotel, Momentum, and Gartner. And when we were chatting, I don't know, a couple of months ago, she told me what she was working on, zombie HR apocalypse. And I said, oh my God, you've got to tell us about this. So I'm really delighted to hand over to her. I'm going to stop sharing now, Sarah, so that you can share. And we are happy to welcome you.
Hi, everyone. I work in technology, but I am like the technology Black Widow. So just bear with me while I figure this out. There we go. Okay. Cool. Thanks. Thanks so much for taking time out of your day. I know how hectic it is to be in the people up space. So I really appreciate it. So I'm the Chief People Officer of Skynamo, but I thought I just tell you a bit about myself and a bit about why this talk exists so that you've got some context for it. So I've only been in the people up space for about 4.5 years now. My role at Skynamo is my first role. So I came in from a strategic communications space. So I've done a lot of internal comms, I've done a lot of leadership work and a lot of culture work, but this was the first time I got the full picture. And I've learned a lot. It's definitely the best job I've ever had, and I absolutely love it. And then what happened was in the beginning of this year, we went through a retrenchment process, not a massive one by global standards, but it affected me a lot. And I found myself hardening up and becoming one of those evil HR people who, when you walk in, when people walked into my office, I'd have this feeling inside me of like, oh, people. And I was just finding myself no longer curious, no longer enthusiastic, and starting to feel like it was just a job. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to disconnect from the role. I didn't want to disconnect from the people, and I really didn't want to disconnect from Skynamo. So I started to try and work out what was happening to me, and then what kind of framework I could use and what I needed to do to reattach into the role. And these are some of my thoughts. They are just my thoughts. So take what works for you, toss out the rest. If some of it may not work in your organization, some of it might not be relevant. But I think for all of us, particularly in the aftermath of COVID, which was a wild ride in 2020, and then the Great Resignation, and then now the economic slowdown, we're carrying a lot. And I think sometimes we don't pause and reflect on what it is that we're doing. So that's where I'm coming from. So the first thing is to try and figure out what exactly zombie HR is. And it can be really hard to identify because it looks so alive, if a little pale, and it's really busy. There's a lot of activity when you're in the zombie HR mode, because you're tracking leave and you're updating emergency contact details and you're worrying about year-end functions. But in reality, there's no beating heart to the activity. People are no longer at the center. And in fact, it's almost like we're using the busyness to avoid the people. And when I started in this role, and the thing that makes me extremely excited about the work that we do, is that our job is to create an environment where people can do their very best work. And when I started moving into a zombie HR mindset, I was no longer in a position to do that, because I stopped caring and I started to just get bogged down in the admin. And the question for me was, why? Why is this happening? Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to my team and my function? And why is this happening inside Skynamo? This is R from a zombie movie called Warm Bodies. And I chose it because it has a happy ending and because it's a rom-com. And it's also my favorite zombie movie. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. And yes, Netflix does think I'm a teenage girl. And the fastest way to identify if you're in a zombie HR experience is the life-draining red tape and bureaucracy. So if you are finding yourself overwhelmed with mind-numbing admin, you're probably having a zombie HR experience. So that's what the business is throwing at you. And then the question is, what is it doing to you as a person? So I wanted to know why. And the very smart people of the world have come up with a word called BANI to explain how anxious we are. And it's actually the first conversation that Angel and I had was around this concept, because I just figured it out and heard about it. And so BANI stands for brittle, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensible. So the world has become so brittle. We've managed to build systems that are shaking under the pressure and on the verge of breaking. So if we look at our financial systems, we look at democracy, we look at the electricity grid, we are starting to see all these structures that we've come to rely on and run our lives on are starting to fail, and that is making us anxious. We are also seeing that a lot of our anxiety is coming from the fact that we no longer know what the right choices are. We don't have one way to do things, one right way. There's so many options, and it's really confusing, and we become completely inert because we don't know how to move. We don't know how to make the right decisions. Things are also non-linear, which is just a way of saying like the old logic no longer applies. The way things have always been done is failing us, and the new ways haven't emerged yet. So we're just in this weird place in between where we can't make sense of it. And it's incomprehensible. Stuff is so big. The problems are so huge. Homelessness, the mental health crisis, the fuel price even. These things that should have simple answers just don't. And where that leaves us as people and as a world is extremely anxious. So we've got this like mega context of anxiety. And inside this, we have businesses. And businesses are also anxious. So the system of business, the energetic entity that is a business, is also extremely anxious. And the way businesses deal with anxiety is pretty much the same way individuals do, which is they try and exert control. So the business tries to put processes in place, and they do that with the thing that is the least controllable in any business, which is the humans. So essentially, business starts to weaponize HR or the people teams to create endless amounts of process so that it can have the semblance or the sense that it has control in this world. So it's so that's what's happening. And then we get trapped as the HR people. We are like working with paperwork inside admin, inside this bureaucratic defense mechanism against anxiety. And we start to, well, basically our hearts stop. We start to lose the will to live because we're no longer doing what we came here to do. So I didn't get into this role so that I could run an EE audit or figure out authorized training providers or kind of sit with a clipboard and try and figure out who is and who isn't in the office on mandatory in the office days. Like, I didn't come here to be a policeman. I came here because I believe in people's growth and I want to see people flourish. And I've never met in all the time, even before I was operating in this space, I've never met someone who works in HR who doesn't want that. Like, none of us came here to tell people what to do. We came here, we got into this world so that we could support people. And the way the world is moving and the incredible pressure anxiety is putting on us to create processes and to control people is taking us further and further and further away from our primary purpose as human beings. And that is utterly exhausting. This is one of my favorite quotes. It comes from a poet who's still alive, so you can actually listen to him talk sometimes. And he was working in an NGO and getting utterly exhausted. And he spoke to his friend who's an Augustine monk, and this was the conversation. So exhaustion doesn't need rest. I'm not saying rest isn't important. I'm a huge fan, but what it needs is wholeheartedness. And when I started to look at what was happening to me at the beginning of the year, I was brokenhearted about what had happened, about the retrenchments, and I was heartbroken about where we had come. And I needed to re-engage in a wholehearted way with the organization and with the work that I was doing. So it wasn't just that I needed to slow down and regroup. It was also that I needed to find a way to re-engage my heart. And if you find yourself in this place, I think the first thing is to realize is that what you're dealing with is a system failure. It's not you. We're not bad people. We haven't let go. We're not evil HR. We're just hardening up in the face of a zombie world. But the pressure is that inside the people teams, we're the only ones who can bring it back to life. So while it's not our fault, it is our responsibility. And I think that there are 3 levers that we can pull. So the first is getting clear on exactly where we are and who we are. The second is to develop a framework of thinking about the work that we do that we can rely on when things get complicated. And lastly, we need to start practicing some extreme self-care. So first, let's get clear on who we are. So my sense of my role is that we work in the in-between spaces. So the philosophers will call it working in the liminal space between business and people. I call it being the village witch. So the way I see it is like, if any of you have read Discworld Stories by Terry Pratchett, that's my framework. So we are the village witch. We take care of the people, but we're not of the people. We deal with the births and the deaths, and we deal with all the messy, uncomfortable stuff in between. We deal with the people ops version of ingrown toenails and black mold. And that's our job. That's what we signed up for. And the challenge is that we exist to support the business with its agendas and needs, and we exist to support the people with their agendas and needs. And we have to walk the line between that, and we have to hold it. It's our job to hold that tension. If we lean too far into the business, we become weaponized admin Nazis. If we lean too far into the people, we become somehow weirdly mothering and responsible for them. And neither of those are healthy, and neither of those produce environments where people can do their best work. And how this balance looks is different in every single company. And but our job is to hold the tension and look for the and. So how do we take care of our people and produce an environment that can be productive? And how do we grow people in their careers and keep them in roles for longer than 18 months to 2 years so that they can really start doing their best work? And how do we find a way when we need to restructure the business and be transparent and supportive of the people who stay and the people who go? And I think that's the challenge. And that's what makes this work so beautiful and magical, but also so difficult. And when we lose our balance, that's when stuff goes a bit pear-shaped and when we become very uncomfortable. The biggest problem for me that I found when I got into this role is really lonely. We are isolated in it because we're not part of the business and we're not part of the people. So we're representing people to our leadership teams, and we're representing the business to the people. So we live nowhere. And it's important that we have a framework and we have a way to take care of ourselves so that we can be healthy. Because if we're not healthy in this place, the whole system starts to suffer. So the second thing that we need to do is develop a framework. I have shamelessly stolen this framework from Agile software. What I love about software development is it lives in uncertainty. So you need an approach that is flexible, but still gives you a measure of containment to be able to do the work. So in the next few slides, I'm going to, on one side, show you the Agile software development methodology values, and then how I've transformed them for myself into people ops values and explain how I've been using them. And I think the thing is to remember, I'll show you the first one. It's not individuals or processes and tools. It's people over policies and processes. We're trading off, but it's not either or. It's about where you lean. So how far do you move into one direction or another? So for me, processes, as we have said, is probably at the center of zombie HR, and it's something we really need to watch out for, because processes are kind of creeping inevitability. It starts off small. It starts off with like a one-page dress code policy, and the next thing you know, you've got some sort of 60 pages with pictures about what is and isn't allowed. And by the time you finish with policies like that, your humanity has completely been erased. We had an experience quite recently where someone did request a dress code policy from the people team. And I said no, because I'm not producing a policy in order to protect someone from having a difficult conversation with a colleague. You know, we work in software development. I'm lucky if some of our software developers have shoes. So I don't even know how to begin to write a policy like that in the first place. But it's also, we've got to lean into the conversations and the difficult places. We can't armor ourselves up against difficult conversations and workplace conflict with policy or process. We have to embrace the anxiety and have the conversations. The second value is relationships over documentation. So working software is the outcome for software development. And I believe in my world that it's our relationships that are a primary outcome for good people ops departments and teams and functions in business. So we have to stop hiding. When I get very anxious, I hide in my office. I don't want to speak to the people. I want to just do email and maybe some light conversations on Slack. And that's when I know that something is wrong and I have to get out of my office and go and have the conversations. And I think the place where this relationships over documentation really becomes relevant to me is in performance management. So when I'm feeling despondent, performance management will happen, and I will think my job is to get the documentation right so that I can have a body of evidence so we can push for some kind of resolution, and then it's defendable in front of the CCMA. So I'm not thinking about the people when I lean into the documentation. I'm only thinking about a preconceived outcome. Whereas if I approach it from a relationship point of view, I can remember that the highest ideal for the business is to have someone in the role who's supported and good at it and taking that role forward. And we have someone in seat right now. Unfortunately, this person's not performing, but it's possible that they could with the right level of support. And if I go in supporting the manager, obviously, and helping create an environment where they can reconnect with their job and we can rebuild the relationship they have with the work and with the manager and with the company, then new possibilities emerge. It's a much more positive way to embrace it, and it creates much more trust in the business. It also, there's some startling outcomes. So since I got a kind of more hopeful approach to performance management and started really taking care of the relationships, and was able to shift the mindset of the business, we've had much more success in our performance management. Like, people have really surprised us in the most beautiful ways. Not every time, obviously, but it happens more often than not now. And I think this can be powerful. And it reminds us why we're here. We're not here to get rid of people. We're here to help people grow. This one, collaboration over negotiation, is really important to me, because a negotiation has two outcomes: either win-lose or lose-lose. In fact, the best outcome is mutual discomfort on both sides. And I never want anyone to join Skynamo feeling uncomfortable. I want them to come into the business, particularly in the hiring phase, and I want them to be excited to be here, and I want them to feel like professionally their needs can be met. And if I'm going in with hardcore negotiation, it's going to be really difficult for me to get that kind of outcome. I don't want anyone grudgingly coming here. And collaboration and figuring out what people need and what the business is able to offer, coming in honestly about what is and isn't possible, is actually, for me, the final part of the recruitment process. Because if we can get that right, then we know we have a culture fit, and we know that that person will be able to thrive here. If we can't get it right, it's probably not a fit anyway. And it's okay. It's not a loss. It's a win for me if the collaboration part of the process doesn't completely work. But I do know that that since we introduced a different way of designing the final offer and having some room for maneuvering, we've had a sort of a different energy when people join the business. And then the last one is responding to change over following the plan. When you stick to the plan, in spite of all the evidence that it's not working, everything slows down. And in terms of becoming a zombie, you don't even become the kind of fast 28 days later zombies. You become the slow, shuffling, grunting kind. And eventually everything just grinds to a complete halt, because you're not responding to the changes, and you're not working in an agile way. So the place where I've seen this show up, and I'm sure some of you will relate, is mandatory office days. So we introduced a default in-office strategy in August, and we've been testing it out. What we wanted is 3 to 4 days in office, 1 to 2 days at home. For most of the business, this has been working really well. And now we're starting to get a sense that in our product, with our developers and our product people, it's not working that well. So they're coming in, but they're feeling uncomfortable, and there's a concern that for some developers, the productivity is dropping. So we have an option now. We can renegotiate or re-collaborate with the developers and figure out what can work best for them and work best for the business, or we can doggedly follow the plan. And doggedly following the plan might create a kind of a sense of fairness across the business, but it's going to get in the way of the business achieving its objectives. So what we're starting to do is sit down and talk to them about what can work, what can't work, and what are the different criteria for coming into the office and not. And I think this way of responding to new information is a way of keeping people at the center. And then practicing self-care. When I say this, I don't mean this. I mean, I'm all for this, but I don't think that this self-care, what I'm talking about is really properly nourishing self-care. And for me, there are 3 places where I find this. The first is in community. So we can't stay isolated. We have to start finding other people to speak to. And I think what I did is when I first came into this role, I created a circle of 5 of us all together, 5 women in technology in the Western Cape in running people teams. And we meet once a month for 2 hours, and we talk about it's a very contained and very confidential space, and we talk about challenges. And it's amazing to feel seen and to feel heard and to feel deeply understood in the challenges I'm facing, but also to get fantastic insight and to really get some answers to some of the things that I'm battling and see what's worked and what hasn't worked in other businesses. There are many other communities as well. And I think we've got to get out of the building basically and start finding people to talk to, because that is extremely nourishing. And just having someone go, me too, can change your whole day. The next thing is starting to honor our boundaries. I think particularly in the work-life balance, the work-home space, I can work all the hours God gave me, and I still won't get to the end of my to-do list. But if I do that, I'm going to burn myself out. I'm going to ruin some of my personal relationships. I'm going to be a terrible mother, and I'm going to start feeling bad about myself. So I think to start holding boundaries, particularly around personal space and what isn't possible for us, becomes extremely important. And when I'm leaning into the mothering of Skynamo, which does happen, I mean, I don't walk this space that elegantly all the time. But when I'm leaning into the mothering of the people, I found this boundary much harder to handle. And so it's one of the signals for me that I'm leaning too far into the people and I need to bring myself back to the middle, is when I'm really battling with my boundaries. And then the last thing is to pay attention to what fills your own cup. And that can be anything. Like I've recently done a course with an organizational psychologist called Working with the Subconscious of Organizations. And it has been life-changing. And probably one of the most exciting things I've done in ever, I think maybe ever in my whole life. But it can also mean, when it stops raining in Cape Town, going for cold water swims in the morning. It can be dancing, it can be crochet, it can be whatever it is for you. But we need to pay attention to our emotional states, because it has such a massive impact on the business. And it's nobody else is going to take care of us. We have to take responsibility for ourselves. And then to never forget, for me, I need to never forget that the reason I do this work is to produce environments where people can do their best work. And I am also the people in this case. It's also to create an environment where I can do my best work. Because when I'm doing my best work, that's when the people can really thrive. And yeah, it's just whenever I find myself thinking that the most important thing is to produce a document or produce a report by the end of the week, then I know I'm starting to lose myself. And then the last thing is that we're never going to not have policies or procedures, but my CEO talks about minimum viable bureaucracy. Like, what is the lightest touch that we can have in place to create containment? We still need a misconduct policy. We still need a leave policy. Well, unless you're going unlimited paid time off. But anyway, you've probably got a policy somewhere just about that. So we need to create some containment in some direction. But the question is it necessary, or could this be a conversation? And yeah, it's what we want is to be healthy, and healthy takes boundaries. So what are the quietest, gentlest boundaries you can put in place? And yeah, So that's some of the thinking. And what I found is that by applying this framework, and by starting to take extreme care of myself, and by leaning into my community and really focusing on what my job is and where I am in the business, I was able to bring myself back to life. My heart started pumping. This is one of the final scenes from Warm Bodies. The zombies do manage to kind of find their hearts. And I believe it was possible for me. So I believe it is completely possible for other people. And yeah. Thank you. Thanks for listening to me, and I hope you got some useful stuff in there. And yeah, it's been great. Thanks.
Thank you, Sam. I'm so glad. When you first showed us the zombie guy, that you said, I've chosen it because it's got a happy ending, which is so crucial. But you said it's one of your favorite zombie films. So I'm fascinated to know how many of these things you've actually watched. I love it. I love it. I think, for such something that's so resonating so much, and it's quite scary when you say that you can be weaponized on the one hand by the organization, and on the other hand, here you are sitting with this over-mothering danger of people, and you're sitting in this no man's land, and there's nobody else who can change it and change this kind of, what did you call it, the system failure, but yourself. And so as terrifying as that is, there's actually no other way that you can not look after yourself. I mean, you have to. It's absolutely part of it. And I love there's this distinction people make between, being selfish. It's actually, you're not being selfish. You're creating for yourself a sense of self, so that you are then, if you can make sure, number one, that you are okay, then that is the way for organizations to be okay. And I think many times maybe people underestimate how important their roles as, HR professionals are. I love seeing, I loved it when, for example, Akona became the head of KFC Africa from an HR background, Bettina now head of Clicks. We're seeing more and more where sort of artificial intelligence and machinery is coming in. The need to be more human, the need to be more empathetic is so crucial, that it's those empathetic leaders who are going to be the ones who really rise to the top. So I would hope that you've helped a lot of people saying, well, gone are the days when I put myself last, or HR isn't important. Actually, it probably is the most important thing.
Yeah, I was quite interested in Puppy's question about to see the difference of this in relation to the sizes of organizations. Was that in relation to the idea of minimum viable bureaucracy? Feels like that timing was when that question came up. Can you remember?
Happy, do you want to clarify? Are you there? I feel it was a bit earlier than that.
Okay.
I think, obviously tech high growth startup versus heavyweight corporate industry, would have different sizes. But if we look at the different industries people are in on this call, and, how many is this resonating with? You could just put in the chat, me, then we know. I think then we know. There's so many things that we could drill down on, but I don't know if you want to comment from that point. Say, do you think because you've got a lovely boss and you're relatively small-ish, it's easier to be heard and seen?
Yeah, I do. We're also a relatively small team though. So my company is 90 people. We're across 3 offices plus a remote team in India. And so I do think, compared to massive organizations of hundreds and thousands of people, the concept of what I like about the concept of minimum viable bureaucracy, it's minimum viable bureaucracy for your organization. What makes sense for you? And we are 2 people, myself and my colleague, who are then HR generalists across the whole organization. I know that some businesses have a lot of specialists. So I think what I was trying to do here was work this out for myself, and then it felt useful for other people. But hopefully it was useful, but it's definitely not a sort of one size fits all. I think it's about figuring out in your organization how to stay engaged with your primary purposes as a people ops person, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I think where we're seeing it with this talent scarcity is that there is now this shift. It used to be the employer knows everything, the employee gets, interviewed, and you're lucky if you get the job. These days, we're seeing a far more balanced approach where, getting the right people in is super hard, and you've got to have a super strong, EVP and make sure everybody's happy within the organization. So we often drill down a lot, obviously, on what is your purpose as a candidate? Why would you join this organization? What is it you want to do? Does that align with, what your personal ambitions are? And I'm wondering how many HR professionals ask themselves that, what are you built to do? And it has to, by definition, almost be different to what the company's values and vision is. Of course it does. That your personal reason for being there and reason for being is so important. And if you haven't articulated it yet, I think it's work well worth doing.
Yeah, I think knowing what it is that feeds you about the work is critical, and then also knowing that you can have it. I think we often feel quite trapped in our organizations, and like I say to people when we are interviewing and they're not the culture fit isn't right. Like, just because it's not right here doesn't mean it's not right anywhere else. It's just like, is this an environment where you can do your best work? And making sure that people fit that. And I think it can be the same for us. So is this an environment where I can do my best work? Do I have the right level of freedom? Do I have the right level of safety or security? Are the structures right for me? So I'm personally quite a haphazard person. So lots of structure freaks me out. So I need quite a lot of freedom. So there are going to be certain environments where I'll be super powerful, like I think this one, and other environments where I'll be suffocated and I'll probably be quite distracted. So I think knowing yourself and knowing what you need to be powerful, and then making sure that that is reflected in the business that you're choosing to work in is really important. And it's also about meeting the business where it's at as well. Like, what does the business need from us to be powerful? What guidance are we able to offer? And remembering businesses are anxious as well, and we need to be part of their scaffolding and structure, which helps them feel more positive about the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's business, if they could just hear one thing, that, there's a system failure and HR the ones that need to fix it. So make sure HR, the ones that are the most happy of all, is actually what needs to, really resonate, instead of you feeling that you're always looking after everybody else. Taryn, thanks for this question. We often state it as being an employer of choice to our employee of choice. Who are the types of personas we want to attract? And that we have created an environment for them to flourish. Maybe I can do that one quite quickly. I think certainly, we go a lot about this, and there's more and more work talking about how vital it is for your sense of autonomy and mastery and purpose. Candidates being able to understand what drives them, why are you doing this? And we always drill down, it's not just about the money. What else is it? What else is important to you? And I think the idea that they can question it, they can know it, and that they can feel part of being able to create something quite special. And I think, and it sounds so simple, but it actually comes right down to our very DNA from when we could have started walking on the planet, is this idea of storytelling. What is my story? What is your story? What is the story of the business? What is the story that I want to leave here? So I think the employees of the future are the empathetic storytellers, creators, problem solvers, relationship builders, and it's becoming even more and more important to have humans now more than ever. I don't know if you want to comment too on that, Sarah, and we've also got another from Diane.
Yeah, I was looking at the thing from Diane. Yeah, I think so. I think EQ and empathy, particularly in the face of AI, is going to become more and more important. And I think to Diane's points about boundaries. So one of the boundaries I had to put in after COVID was not working on weekends. That was a huge one. And also, it's going to probably sound a bit ridiculous, but I was at a point where I was thinking about giving up therapy because I couldn't fit it in, and I felt bad taking time out of the office. And then had a very clear conversation with my CEO about it, and then found a way to build that in. So it's about, so the self-care and the boundaries was very, very linked. Like, if I'm going to be able to do this work, I need to take care of my own mental health. And that means an hour and a half every 2 weeks, including travel, where I'm not going to be available. And so very much around that kind of working. And then one of the questions I have for myself is, whose job is this? Because people will come into the People Up space and they will try and give me work to do. And some of it is my job and some of it is not my job. Some of it should be happening in the manager one-on-ones. Some of it should be happening in some initial difficult conversations within the teams themselves. And so really that boundary around, I'll take on work because I quite like the validation and I like to feel quite important. And just learning to just be, this is not actually my job. This is for the business to thrive. We all need to do what is right for us to do. So those are some of the boundaries. I hope I've answered your question, Diane.
Brilliant boundary from Diane.
Okay, cool.
And Bill, thank you.
Yeah. Cool. So we work with lots of different size companies, and so many of them not aligning their personal KPIs to the business goals. Purpose is being lost for them. Also the fact that the request for mid-weight talent. Oh, yes, I know. Yeah. I think there is some misunderstanding around this need for people to behave in a senior way without having the experience. And I think the pressure of the salaries having gone mad and budgets not being able to compete has put a lot of pressure on the business. And that has made us look for these like crazy unicorns, someone who's able to operate at a senior developer role with a mid-level developer salary. And it's just not possible. And one of the things that I've had to do, and I think this is where you can work with the people teams, is just to get really clear about what is and isn't possible within the salary band. And if that means we have to rescope the work or shift what we're expecting from the business, and that's just what has to be done, because we have to meet life on life's terms, and these are the realities. And then in terms of personal KPIs not linking to business goals, one of the biggest areas of growth that we've seen here, and I don't think we've got it right yet, is in helping our managers be managers, and helping our managers understand that it's only by truly aligning what people want to achieve for themselves with the business that we get a really great performance. And so I think that sounds, for me, building management capacity at Skynamo is probably the primary job. To try and manage some of these things. They're very real.
I think what we're learning, and it maybe goes back to Taryn's question as well about your perfect employee. I think this potential to learn, willingness to learn, that more and more we work going into this idea of hiring for transferable skills and appetite to learn versus what have you done in the past and do you tick all the boxes. So, maybe the traditional thing of this is the job spec and find somebody to match, tick, 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 is actually, we might look back at that and go, well, let's see what skills are out there and see what we can use and shape around those people versus around the departments that we think, should exist. Mm-hmm. It's far more people driven, which is really exciting. Sally, thank you. You've shared our poll. Guys, if you wouldn't mind completing that as we're going, we still got the floor open, but it does, ask for your opinions on a few things. And maybe we can also share other people's boundaries. I mean, so for me, I do Nia dance. Nia, it's a fusion of dance, art, martial arts, and healing art. And I teach it as well. And my staff know, lots of our clients know that when our angel has Nia, then that's just that. I come back a different person. And some people go, when is your next Nia class? Because it is a game changer. What we've also done is Enneagrams on ourselves, on the teams. I'm sure you guys know this, obviously, yourselves, because you that's the space you're in. But, on your own self, understanding your own self. What we've also brought in, it comes from Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In, and she talks about radical candor. And I love it because you say to somebody, may I have a radical candor moment with you? So they're now bracing themselves because this is something important. And you might say, you say the word too often in when you're talking, and it, doesn't give you the justice that it should. Or, when you suggested this to me in the meeting, it sounded ruder than I thought you'd meant. But what that radical candor little framing window is and everybody in the organization understands what radical candor is. It does give each party the opportunity to hear and learn with no politics on either side. And I think that's the important thing, that you are feeling heard and validated and understood. So I love saying your things about communities, sharing stuff, learning from each other, talking through your stuff, and hopefully even people hearing that it's not just you going through this, that a lot of people are, that already that's it's not just one or two people feeling exhausted and deflated. Very, very important.
Yeah, and I think having some training on how to have crucial conversations and give and receive feedback is really important, because feedback is hard. Like, it's hard for all of us. So creating a culture of feedback and creating safety containers around how to do that is critical. But it sounds like you got it right.
Without a doubt. And relationships, how important that is, to share something personal. I always used to dive into a business conversation because I'm quite impatient. And actually, it goes so much more. You tell them about how you're feeling and how are they actually. And I used to think it was sort of just waffling in the beginning. And actually, it's so crucial for understanding where each other are coming. So ways that you yourself, whether it's with fellow HR professionals in your organization or with others, I mean, we can certainly keep seeing what other topics of interest there are out there for this crazy time. I mean, I think the point is that it's maybe too easy to say, but that business needs to hear this, right? It's
yeah, but it's our job to tell business. Like that is our job. And as the people leaders, as I was saying earlier, like to meet the business where it is. So for Skynamo, the concept of purpose hasn't landed. We're not a company that has a high ideal purpose baked in. So we're not saving the planet. We're a very wonderful sales app and CRM and ordering tool. That's what we are. And what I found is, by changing the language from purpose to primary task, I've managed to be able to communicate much better with the business people about what it is that we're trying to find, what is the golden thread throughout the business. But I think it's also not to get too stuck on so-called best practice, like figure out what language works for your business and then just bring them along. And it can take, like, vulnerability-based leadership takes years to build, but there's micro vulnerabilities that happen, just watching someone, watching one of your male leaders pat someone else on the shoulder and go, like, I heard about your wife, are you okay? Like, those micro vulnerability moments are really, really important in the business. It doesn't all have to be the way we see it on TV.
And I loved what the employee engagement head of Nando's was saying at that conference, I think, where you and I met, Sarah, was this idea that it's not a one size fits all, as we know, you know, and you would presume, for example, that a pregnant employee wants to stay at home before she gives birth, but one pregnant employee wants to come in 3 times a week, one wants to come in a half day, one wants to do this. There's no one shape fits everybody as a stereotype. And I think that also really resonated with me. You know, some mothers want to escape the kids, some want to be there. You know, some workaholics can be better workaholics if they lock themselves in their office, at their home office 24/7. So, you know, to think that there should be blanket approaches is the question. Everyone is, you know, stifling the individuals. I mean, I salute all of you guys. I really do. It would be good to carry on this conversation as we go. Are there any more questions people have for Sarah, or any comments or any sharing? We'd love to hear your guys' take. You know, do you have any comments? Would be wonderful to learn from and share. This idea of other people's boundaries, which is so important to understand. And I always talk about the word just. So you know about, you can't use the word just, because I'm just going to ask a question. I'm just going to do this. Why apologize? I'm asking a question. I'm going to the bathroom. You know, stop undermining yourself every time you go along with that word, which is absolutely banished in our office. Thank you, everybody, for this. There is a poll that Sally has put on the thing. Oh, here, Helenese. How do you set the boundaries without feeling guilty or seeming as if you're not doing all you have to anymore?
Oh. So the guilt is therapy and coaching. I'm a mom, and just, you know, like, that just comes with a whole truck of guilt, even without the working. And I think that comes in the conversation and relationship that you have with the person you report to, in my case, my CEO. And it's around constantly checking in and getting feedback around, am I doing what the business requires me to do? Like, am I meeting the core business needs? And then also being flexible about the boundaries. You know, some weeks are better than other weeks. Absolutely. But this week is a bit complicated. And 3 months ago, I was having the best time ever, you know, where everything was easy and I seemed to be spacious and have enough time for everything. But I think the guilt is around permission to not be perfect. And also for me, the realization that the work will never be done. I'll never be done. So I have to figure out what is enough for today. And also, I'm sure, you know, like some Fridays I kind of slide into Friday and I've got nothing left, and other Fridays I've got another 2 days in me. So I think it's just about forgiving yourself a little bit for the way that your energy is working. But I'm a huge fan of therapy.
So what about this
be here without my therapist?
As a thought that maybe you should feel more guilty if you're not looking after yourself, because you are the one who is going to, you know, help the entire business. So if there's guilt to be felt, it should be that you're not setting boundaries. Possibly, you know, that's when we swing it. What's going to make you be your best? How do you go there?
Yeah, and then also to remember that we're modeling, particularly if we're senior in the business, we're modeling how to take care of ourselves. So in my organization, our leadership team is quite young, so has young families, and they model how to parent and work very beautifully. And I think to also see yourselves as role models for other people in the business is also helpful for me, because I can see when someone else is overworking and I think it's a terrible idea. And yet when I'm overworking, I think I'm not doing enough. So yeah, just creating some reflection for ourselves.
Thank you. So we as Homecoming X, we've got lots of specialists in all different parts of HR that you can hire for an hour or a day or forever. If anybody feels they want some specialist help in any of these areas, please give us a call. And please do continue to share what you've learned. I think it'll be great to stay in touch, and maybe we can do a follow-up on this subject, maybe in a couple of months or maybe early next year, to see, you know, have we had success I think it really comes to, am I excited to go to work? Am I in love with my career? Am I happy? I mean, that is to boil down to something as simple as that, is, am I happy? So I challenge you all to go and make sure that you make yourselves happy and give yourself permission not to be perfect, as you said. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks so much for this opportunity, Angel, and thanks to everyone who was here. It was yeah, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to share.
So important. Really appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Avril. Thank you.
That was amazing. Thank you.
Bye.